If you've ever heard the expression, trying to make a dollar out of 50 cents, then you know that it was created for us dreamers, for those people unhappy with the circumstances that they were born into, and their relentless desire to make something from the hand they were dealt. This is me on my journey now. The weekend after last, after 10 years of waiting, I finally got to see Wicked on the big screen. There was this moment while I was watching the film where I was sat on the edge of my seat, watching the screen, eyes wide in wonder. It was what I had always loved about musicals. They made me feel like there was something inside that was golden, too big to be contained. Many times I'd wake from the dream I had, desperate to put the dream down on paper so I could someday get it out into the world. My childhood was not great, but I had writing and it made my world gold. I started creating my own stories before I even knew how to read, making up tales to go with the pictures on the pages of my books. But then once I learned how to read, it changed everything. Opened up new worlds of adventure, took me to places I'd never been before. It didn't take long to realize, though, that there weren't really a lot of books written with people like me in them. So I started writing a published poem at 10, my first writing competition at 12, and a year later I began work on my first novel, The Game of Life. After reading Outsiders and learning Essie Hinton had published her first book at 16, it became my life's goal to finish my first book by the time I was 15. Amazingly enough, I did. I copyrighted it so it would forever be mine, but didn't otherwise have the resources to see it published. So I sat it on the shelf. 16 was when I first started writing about Tracy Burroughs, this young, plucky girl with dreams of Harvard, whose life got hit with a curveball because of love. Originally set in the early aughts, the more I wrote her, the more I realized she didn't belong in our time. She had more story to tell than I had accumulated in years. Tracy's story was originally written as this one mega book called Until Death Do Us Part that covered her life from high school to the present. After receiving some pretty heavy criticism about an early draft of my work, I realized it was too big. Her story couldn't be told in just one book, so I separated it into 3 novels. The White Fence, from 1965 to 1969, A House of Cards, which takes place from 1969 to 1971, and The Song of Our Lives, which cover the years from 1971 to the present. I finished A House of Cards nearly a decade from the first moment I dreamed Tracy into existence. 2 years later, in 2013, the second book and first part of Tracy's journey was published. At this point in time, I had a college degree, but was working at a retail outfit for $12.10 an hour. Not exactly the future I had envisioned for myself. That was all going to change after The White Fence came out. It would help me realize my dream. So where but the Golden State would I have ventured to? With only $1,250 to my name, 2 months of rent paid for, and whatever belongings I could fit into my tribute, I left Huntsville and headed west, trying to make something from my 50 cents. It wasn't much, but I had this dream. I was ready to make it gold. So I want to talk a little about Huntsville, Tracy, and me. In the 1950s, German scientists, including Werner von Braun, were illegally relocated to Huntsville to build up the American space program and an intelligence operation called Operation Paperclip. It changed the course of what Huntsville would become. Basically, Huntsville experienced a bigger glow-up than Tarjay did from its humble roots as Target. Since I started writing Tracy when I was 16, there's a lot of me and her. We're both children of divorce, both transplants to Alabama who wanted to attend Harvard and had plans to be lawyers, and both of us longed to get away from this place we had relocated to. Like Tracy, I moved to Alabama when I was really young. Moving from southern Illinois to northern Alabama was a huge cultural shock for me. Things moved slower in the South in almost every way, from education to racial politics. It took some time for me to adjust. I think I still am. In the world Tracy inhabited, it was on the cusp of a dramatic change. By the time Tracy starts high school in 1965, the town was forced to integrate due to the presence of the Black Rock Arsenal. In the real Huntsville, the Redstone Arsenal was the reason that Huntsville integrated earlier than most places in the state, though it would happen years later than I have it happening in my book. The school Tracy would have gone to was named the William Hooper Council High School. If Tracy had really existed, she would have attended school at the all-black high school instead of the fictional Mason High. Like myself, however, both her school and mine were named after a former slave master. Another similarity Tracy and I shared. Ever since we moved, all I could think about was one day moving away. 17 years later, I was finally making that happen. It seemed like the cards were finally falling in place. Now, if you've never been to either Los Angeles or Hollywood, or have only seen it in the movies or on TV, experiencing it in real time can be shocking. Beneath its veneer and sparkle is a place where many people come to make their dreams come true and are left with the harsh reality of what those failed dreams leave behind. But that's not as easy of a sell as presenting these cities of beautiful people chasing big dreams. It's America's Oz. Sam Fisher has a song, This City, about how it will break your heart. I listen to it often and think about being 25 and moving to Cali. I listen and am reminded of another prescient song that played on my iPod when I was driving across Route 40. Frost's Hollywood is Not America. It helped me remember Hollywood isn't reality. The glam is an easy sell, but it's nowhere near as easy to make it work. The actual time that I lived in LA was short, just 2 months. Repacking boxes I'd never really unpacked. I drove to a town 3.5 hours away from everywhere in the state to stay with my mom, who was living in California at the time. The plan was to regroup, save some money, then try again. It didn't work that way, because life isn't a movie. There is a kind of depression that sets inside of you that stems from putting all of your faith, hope, and determination into one thing and then finding it doesn't work out. It's the kind that eats at the world you once painted as golden, covering up everything in this tar-like reality it's hard to see around. In no particular order, my money had run out. I was an adult living with my mom. My car broke down. I was unable to find work. The bills piled, and I just kept digging a bigger hole. And the worst thing, one that I never would have anticipated, I stopped writing. I'd always been a writer. It was the most defining characteristic of who I was. There's this scene in Sister Act 2 where Rita and Sister Mary Clarence are talking about passion, and she quotes, "If you wake up in the morning and you can think about nothing but writing, then you are a writer." Writing was my passion, and suddenly it was gone. There aren't enough words to describe what it's like to lose the thing that had driven me for so long. Some days the depression was so severe that the most I could do was get out of bed in the morning and shower. And I missed green. Alabama is so green. The lack of rain, of weather, of everyday change seemed just another reflection of my unchanging state. It forced me to find green in the little things. In Glee, a show that combined two of my favorite things, musicality and prose, in spending time and getting to know my mom as an adult, in unexpected rainstorms, or visiting places in California, in discovering fan fiction, which in time got me writing again. I think it might have actually saved me. One of the things I had always been adamant about was creating my own voice, my own stories. I had long shunned the idea of becoming a ghostwriter. Writing for me was always about expressing yourself. Letting someone else lay claim to what was your essential you felt dirty to me. I wrote to reveal myself. How could I do that if I was copying someone else's work? But with the discovery of fan fiction, I got new perspective. I started out just reading, but soon I started writing my own. It wasn't mine. It wasn't something meant to be published under my own name, but it was something. It was a start. Fan fiction gave me a community. Updating my work gave me deadlines. Analytics gave me direction. Comments gave me feedback. It was amazing watching my audience grow in real time. I started to gain fans all over the world. People enjoyed what I was putting out, and even if it wasn't my characters that they were enjoying my storytelling. It was little spots of golden on this new landscape I was learning how to navigate. Things were looking up. Then my mom's job moved. I had a friend here from Alabama who was living 3.5 hours away in this place called Fresno. The choice was to either move there with a friend or move back to Huntsville as a failure. So I stayed. Fast forward 5 months later, I had overstayed and was now living in my car. Life comes at you in waves. Sometimes it's easy. Other times it inundates you, threatens to pull you down. Sleeping in my car for a month was the worst I thought life could get. To be absolutely honest, if I hadn't had the knowledge that I'd written 2 books, that I'd set my mind to writing them, to getting them published, to put them out in the world, I don't think I would have survived that time. I moved to LA because I believed in my dream. I put in the work, looked for creative ways to market and sell my book, handed out business cards and book stubs, bust to the tourists on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I even had my picture taken by a guy who was trying to do this Humans of New York thing, but for LA. Before I left Huntsville, so much seemed like it was slipping into place. I thought it was kismet. It didn't matter that I had less than $2,000 in savings. I thought it'd be easy to find work. I applied to so many jobs, both before and after I was in LA, that I was still getting rejections a year and a half later. Things didn't work out after all. I was living in my car. I knew no one else in the city but that friend who I could no longer stay with. And I didn't want to ask my family to help build me back up. They didn't even know what was going on with me at the time. Well, that is until someone broke into my car, stole my laptop, my camera, and of all things, my favorite dress. It had pockets. I finally had to ask for help. My sister sent me a plane ticket to DC, where she was living at the time, and I was there for 2 weeks when I got the call for a job offer 3 months after I had applied. I knew at the time that if I came back to Fresno, I would be homeless, but it was a full-time job with benefits. So I came back, and it was wild. During the day, I would help people sign up for food stamps and Medi-Cal, working every hour of overtime possible, and during the night, I would sleep in a tent. This went on for 7 months. When people hear about other people going through an ordeal, they think it's over when it's physically over. But the scars that the ordeal leaves outlives time. You never stop unwrapping the bandages around the wounds that were created. It's been nearly a decade since I've been homeless, but I still look at places around town for a good place to sleep should my fortunes turn again. When I purchased my car, I made sure that it had enough room for me to sleep in if the need once again arose. Even after I had steady income coming in, it took 7 months for me to have enough saved to find an apartment with a landlord willing to rent to me. So I had a job, an apartment, and that's how life was for the next 9 years. My job became my life. I worked as many hours as possible, leaving when it was dark in the morning, returning when it was dark at night. I promoted, went from being an eligibility worker, making $15 an hour, to being a senior staff analyst and making $43. I went from being homeless to implementing homeless programs for the people in Fresno and the surrounding areas. By all metrics, I was a success, but it wasn't sustainable. The actual work I was doing was fulfilling, but work itself left me unfulfilled. It was a toxic environment that sapped everything from me. Not even 2 weeks into this job that I had become homeless again to take, I had been threatened and asked for a bribe from a supervisor in front of another supervisor. This was the culture I had unknowingly signed up for. Work was a battlefield. So many times over 9 years, I thought about quitting. When you work in a position long term, you get comfortable. You start to ease into a routine. Every time I thought about quitting, I remembered being homeless. What it felt like having to walk 2 miles to the gym for a shower, 2 miles for groceries, 2 miles for laundry, a day of travel only to come home at night to my car or to sleep in a tent. Circumstances had made me strong enough to survive what I once would have thought was unsurvivable, but it had also made me lose the kind of daring that allowed me to move across the country in the first place. So I kept with my job, thinking that the years I was accruing meant I was building towards something. Maybe it was the courage to try again, because still, I wrote. I was back to writing my own stories. Among other things, I started work on a series called The Fourth Wall, an examination of celebrity that has been one of the funnest things I've ever written. I did poetry competitions, gained a little bit of note in the poetry world. I traveled, even made a few trips back to Huntsville after years of being away, juggled work and school so I could earn my MFA in creative writing. My portrait had changed. It was no longer bathed in light. There was some darkness, some waves, some red lights cautioning me to stop, but still there were those moments of joy, of green, of gold. This brings me back to Tracy. It is always back to Tracy because her story, my story, has yet to be finished. I haven't written her in because I wanted to give her the chance to have the best one possible. I have the saying, if, after everything you've been through, you end up exactly where you thought you were going to be, you didn't do it right. The biggest thing about Tracy's story is that her life doesn't end the way she plans. I knew that back when I was 16 years old. The dream I had, the one that started this whole journey, didn't end the way I wanted to, so I woke up and tried to write a better ending. Sometimes that's all you can do. Tracy Burrows is a girl who dared to dream of Harvard during a time when women couldn't attend university and Black people were legally discriminated against. She grew up in a time of change, of challenge. Being herself was its own revolution. She had the strength in her to dare because I have the strength in me to do so as well. So here I am, 38 years old, one class away from my master's degree. I quit my job to start my own company and am consciously choosing to go full force into my writing, daring to step off the cliff and try to defy gravity. This was never the picture I set out to paint, but this is what happens when you live. You find your moments of peace, your flaming moments of clarity. We make those moments last as long as they can by finding our light to share. My name is Jacqueline White /J Noel. I'm a writer, a poet, and artist. This is Paint and Prose, where I paint and talk about literature. Thank you for starting this journey with me. I can't wait to see where it goes.